I'm Yong Ma, Senior Curator of Haegue Gallery.
And you're working on a very special exhibition that just opened today.
Yes, indeed. Haegue Yang Leap Year, her first survey, in a way, in London.
I see beautiful photography. I'm seeing a slideshow. I see installation. I see 3D pics. There's some pictures up there that are kind of mergers of pictures. We've got kind of everyday objects made into sculpture. Upstairs, there was a heat lamp on me. I think all of my senses have been tested in this show.
Exactly, absolutely. That's one of her very known, I mean, I can call it motif perhaps even, the sensory sort of experiences. For her, it's actually a reflection for us to understand memories in a way, how we actually encounter something. Let's say the heat lamp, you get the blast of heat coming at you. So potentially it triggers something in you from the past that you can actually try to relate back to the present.
And the use of everyday objects, like the drying rack to put an installation on. Is this because they wanted to just experiment with materials that they could see around them, or are they just showing that, these are accessible objects that we see every day, and now look at them?
Yeah, of course, the transformation of that's very important. But, again, it comes back to, I think, her interest in art history. If you look at it, it's like there's something about them that slightly, I think, you can relate back to, let's say, Arte Nouveau, the big Italian contemporary art movement, that using very cheap, inexpensive materials. So that's very important to Haegue, that these kind of very cheap looking and inexpensive materials can actually be quite sublime, quite beautiful, and she's actually interested in transforming them in a way.
The artist is here today at the show. She just did an amazing introduction. How much time has she spent in London over the years?
We've been over the last 2 years. I think she's been to London maybe 4 or 5 times for site visits and meetings and stuff like that. But because I've known her for such a long time, so we've just been constantly in conversation. We're on Zoom almost every weekend. Just talk about the show. She's sense of attention detail is amazing. So every single detail is very important to her.
When did you meet? You met around almost 20 years ago now. When did you guys meet?
Just her friends, art scene is kind of quite small. I was just sort of starting out as a curator. She's, she was actually sort of gaining momentum already in Europe. She was actually in quite a lot of biennials already at that point. But we just met through friends, and then we got on quite well. And then ever since, we were just talking a few days ago that, not just because we've known each other for so long that it's very special, because I've seen quite a lot of her shows throughout the years. So my understanding of the practice sometimes is quite different to people that actually just, started working with her. Because I got this sort of library in my head almost over the last 15, 16, 17 years. I've seen so many of her shows. So it's like when we started working together and tried to put together a checklist, I was like, she was actually quite surprised about some of my choices.
This one, it's all about people communing around a table, sort of sharing time together.
So exactly. So it's actually, these are, for her, they are documentation, really. They're not photography. They're just documentation. And these are meant to, apparently if you translate them, they're called the sitting tables. So in Korea, if you go to some old-fashioned neighborhood, you will still sort of see them around. So there's outside shops or restaurants, and people are just able to gather there if they want to, for people to hang out. But they're also disappearing as well. So this work is about that, the sense community being displaced.
As a curator, do you almost have to pitch the artist and say, hey, I've surveyed your work over this many years, these are the things I think, and these are the reasons? Is that the sort of conversation you have with her?
Yeah, I don't think I would say pitching as more a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But with Haegue, again, it's very unique. I think there's certain kind of trust since we've known each other for so long that, I think I presented my checklist and my vision for the show, and I think it's sort of, we were sort of on the same page pretty much. Of course, there's some changes along the ways, not because Haegue wanted to, but sometimes out of practical reason, because we can't get a hold of the work, because the work's in a collection that is too expensive to ship. There are things like that. So often it's much more practical than just conceptual as well.
Can you tell us about the faces on the middle floor there? There's some black and white images, and they're I don't know if it's all the same face, but you've sort of twisted the images up quite a bit.
So these are all actually historical figures across time, mostly modernist figures, cultural artistic figures that she admires and she sort of looks towards in terms of their practices and how they informed her own practice. And so she sort of mashes them together into these kind of totems.
Okay. And then the sculptures in there, these huge, fluffy, playful sculptures.
Yeah, so she's very interested in craft traditions, right? So I don't know if you've seen some of the works. They're actually sort of basket weaving techniques from Korea, very old school basket weaving technique. So she did the same with this one, but the Philippine version of it. So I don't know exactly how they were made, but they were actually done in a way that was actually historically how people in the Philippines would weave basket. And she worked with local artisans together to create these works. They're meant to be in reflection, and given the country is surrounded by water as well, so these are meant to be deep sea creatures emerging from the sea.